Hey, everybody, welcome to Text Request Talks, where we have conversations with business leaders about how they make things happen. Presented by Text Request, the business text messaging platform that lets you text from your office phone numbers directly on your computer or any other device so you can stop making phone calls and start actually getting responses. Learn more at textrequest.com. I'm Kenneth Burke, and today we're talking with Justin Hajek, who is the Assistant Vice President for Programs at DialCare. So, Justin, it's great to talk with you.
Yeah, nice to talk to you as well. Thanks
So
for having
thanks
me.
thanks for being here. Can you just
Yeah,
give us a quick rundown of what DialCare does and what you do for them?
for sure. So DialCare is a telemedicine company, which at this point, after the pandemic, a lot of folks are probably familiar with in some capacity. Telemedicine has actually been around for a lot longer than that. And so has really kind of come into the forefront of folks' just everyday lives even now. And so we provide a couple different clinical programs today on the physician side, which is what most people are going to be used to, kind of a convenient option instead of potentially going to an urgent care or maybe the emergency room. We also do a lot in the mental health space right now, and so that is actually really booming, just even coming out of the pandemic. Um, we are doing some work in the dental field, and then also for pets as well. So primarily just a consumer application where individuals can connect with the clinician of the various types that I described earlier, so they can have a conversation over their typically their mobile device without having to kind of leave the comfort of their home, and a lot of times just makes things easier, convenient, and faster for them. So
Yeah, I can tell you, if people can't tell just from listening to me, my wife and I are just getting over colds, and something like this would have been very helpful for us in that phase because it's nothing serious. We just had a couple quick questions. Is this, do we need to get medicine? Do we need to
Mhm.
not? Can you kind of
Yep.
point us in the right direction? Um, do you work well with insurance providers, or is that an issue for the people you serve?
We do work with some insurance providers. Primarily, our kind of, I guess, business model or what we think works the best is actually to go direct to the patients to either receive almost like what we call a visit fee. And so sometimes that is being provided through like a carrier, like an insurance company, like you mentioned, but other times it's being provided directly by potentially a sponsoring organization. So an easy example to think of would be like as an employer. So as an employee of whatever company, they may provide various benefits and products to you, right? As being an employee. And so if telemedicine or dial care is one of those, um, then it's kind of slotted into, what you're able to access. And then there's different kind of fee structures within that. But um, not going through insurance can sometimes give us more flexibility, especially when we're talking about on the mental health side. Things have drastically improved even over the last few years, but traditionally there hasn't been extensive mental health coverage for, psychology, psychiatry type of visits. And so what we saw in the industry is folks were starting treatment, coverage would stop, and then so treatment would stop, which is not great in a lot of cases, especially in the mental health world. And so if we can kind of go directly to consumer, give them a discounted sort of fee based off of retail rates, because we're not a brick and mortar shop, so we don't have like the overhead kind of that surrounds that, then it can be a more cost effective solution sometimes.
You mentioned earlier telemedicine has been around for a while, but became popular or at least more normalized through the pandemic.
Yes.
And you've been at Dial Care since 2017, and you're with a partner company before that, if I'm not mistaken. And so, can you talk us through a little bit of the transition that you saw in the telemedicine world?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think what we've seen over certainly the last, I guess we're just over 3 years now from the pandemic, is to your point, a more normalization, a more maturity of consumers' expectations. And so um, previously to that, it was a little bit of a hit and miss based on if you've heard of telemedicine, if you've used it, know what its kind of benefits and values are. And a lot of times the conversation was sort of just discussing what the value is. And so now everyone kind of understands the value because they were forced to, maybe in some situations while, doctors' offices were closed. And it's become more a regular offering for even, primary care providers to offer to their patients, whether it's to help mitigate, hey, if you're just making an appointment to ask a few questions, that can probably be handled over the phone, over video, whatever that looks like. It could even be a lesser license level. So maybe we throw in a nurse or a nurse practitioner, depending on your questions, right? And so it kind of frees up the MDs to practice what we call like at the top of their license. And so they're not spending time answering some of those questions that someone else could help with. And if they're in the office, there's sick people in the office. There's lots of just other things, going on there. You got to drive there. Maybe it's for a kid. And so you got to take them out of school. There's just lots of other kind of implications that surround that. And so we've seen consumers go from more like just educating them on what it is and how it's used to now this maturity has created an expectation of consumers where before it was just really cool that they could talk on their phone, but now the market has matured and so their expectations have matured as well.
Has that caused, excuse me, has that caused you and DialCare to change a lot as well, or is it more or less the same as it was beforehand because you were already, fully remote telemedicine, are already doing some of the same things?
It has changed to some extent. We have a much more structured, sort of formalized process as to how we are deciding like what we're building next as far as the technology goes. It's a bit more strategic on what we feel like will have the most impact to our membership population and will bring the most value. It also, I mentioned pets earlier, and so I believe we are one of, if not the only companies providing human and animal telehealth within the same chassis or platform. And so that's an example of, okay, people are used to the traditional, hey, I've got a sore throat, I have a headache, those types of symptoms. But now adding pets in, adding mental health, these other sort of programs we've launched over the years has really kind of rounded out our offering. And so our pitch is kind of consumers can come to us for all of those needs if they want to, instead of having to go to one company for something and another company for a different option. And so that's really helped us as well.
What do you do to bring in new patients? I imagine once somebody has worked with you and has had a good experience, they want to come back, but how do you get them in that first time?
Yeah, good question. So that is the $1 million question for us. We have we don't have a lot of drop off, but the drop off we have is setting up their account, just getting things kind of rolling. Once they have that first visit, then they're pretty much locked in. They're sold to the convenience, they're sold to the flexibility it provides, and they're constantly returning. But some of the programs have different churn rates where like therapy, you may be having a conversation once a week, whereas on our urgent care program, it may be, a couple times a year based on when you're sick or things that are going on. So different capacities there, but we try and do a lot of education. We do a lot of social media, a lot of kind of campaigns like that, not only to remind them of ways that it can be used in case they haven't thought of that, because it's not just what we call, sneezes and sniffles. Like it can also be for rashes. It can be for if you've cut yourself and you don't know if you need to go to the emergency room to get stitches. Well, if we say, no, try these things first, that could help avoid a big cost to you if it's really not as bad as you may think it is. And so there's a lot of what we call like emergency room avoidance type of conversations as well. Now, granted, if you tell us, you have chest pain, shortness of breath, we're not going to mess around with having that conversation. We're going to direct you immediately to, appropriate levels of care. But that's an edge case. It's not very common. And so we've just tried to find kind of our place in that.
And then you all have been text request customers for a while, and we have loved working with you all. And so I've got to ask, how does text request fit
Yeah.
into what you do and how you work with patients?
So when we started in 2017, I was the first sort of employee from our partner company you mentioned that had kind of been brought over to help spin up a lot of the operational aspects of DialCare. And one of those was communication with our patients and providers. And I was manually texting people at times. And I had to create like a separate contact list on my personal cell phone. And it was just, frankly, it was a nightmare. And that's not scalable, right? It's great when we launched in our like kind of soft launch and I can handle that for a few months or however long that was. But over time, that was not going to be a long-term solution. And so I don't recall exactly when, but probably within the first year of launching, we were looking for solutions to help streamline that communication flow, not rely on, I mean, we even so far as now that I remember when we launched, we had purchased cell phones for some of our customer service team that they would rotate between um, who was on shift essentially. And so they would kind of pass the cell phone off because a lot of what we're doing in telemedicine is there's sensitive information. And so we didn't want to force them to use their personal phones to do that. And so that was obviously also not scalable. And so finding a solution like text request was definitely something that we identified really early. And to your point, we've been using it for a while and it's helped us bring great success. So
And then just to clarify one piece there, so you're using it to connect the patients who say that, hey, I've got an issue here. You're using to connect that with a medical provider. Is that correct?
so the patient communication is more of that was not so our initial um, the initial reason we were looking for a solution like text request was primarily on the provider side. And so we do a lot of communication with them, whether that is just educational sort of content on, hey, here's a new feature, here's how to use it, or here's a reminder not to do this, or to, make sure you're doing this to kind of fall in line with our like clinical expectations. But also if there are escalated situations where a patient is unhappy or was not satisfied, or maybe thought they heard something different from the clinician, providers don't answer their phones traditionally super well, and emails just take too long to get some of those responses. And so text was, a much faster way to kind of reach them. And then the patients just naturally kind of fell in line with that as well, where when they realized they could text us for customer service type of conversations instead of going to some, you know, generalized email inbox that they kind of have questions on how long it'll take to get a response or if there's a real person even on the other end. So a lot of that I think was solved when we started actually engaging with our patients through text as well.
Something that's interesting to me, just to nerd out a little bit. I'm on the marketing side. I work for TextQuest, obviously, all these things, and so I spent a lot of time diving into the numbers and the reasons why people might text for all these different use cases, promotions, upsells, sales team follow ups, etc. And the one that is always the easy default that everybody seems to have the most or get the most value from is what you just said, is the customer service, where there's
Yeah.
all these little questions back and forth, and I just want to get a quick response. And if I was going to ask my spouse or a friend for a quick thing, I would just send them a text, and it parlays pretty well into the professional world too.
Yeah, absolutely. We weren't, it was our first time kind of experiencing that because we have a 24/7 customer service team, right? A full stack call center solution that our sister company of DialCare has been around for 30 plus years. And so that's been a big, aspect of that. And so the texting element was definitely new, like just to the companies in general when we really started that, but it's expanded outside of DialCare into other brands, into other kind of branches as well. We were kind of like the guinea pigs or the proof of concept to some extent. And so we can't handle everything because we want to be careful, like I said, with the nature of our business. If people feel the need to, or just for reasons we can't control, decide to start sharing sensitive info, we want to take that out of text message. And so that's, we'll sometimes put a stop to that, but primarily that's not what's being done. It's like you said, answering questions, or sometimes they just ask us, hey, how much longer do I need to, wait for the doctor? Like simple things like that. They're great. Yeah, actually it'll be about 2 minutes. And so get ready.
Switching gears a little bit. So you've been at DialCare for 7 years now. You've been with the partner organization for years before that. That's a pretty long tenure. So I'm curious,
Yes.
what keeps you around? Is there something about the culture? Is it the I don't know. I don't want to put words in your mouth yet. So just tell me, what makes you stay?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I feel like it's kind of a cliche answer, but yeah, it's the people and the culture. I mean, we're a privately held company that is owned by a family, and so they've always wanted to create that just kind of family experience with the employees as well. And so while we've grown significantly in terms of number of employees since I've started, there's still always been a focus on how do we bring people together? How do we make this, larger place feel smaller, things like that. And so this is my first with the partner company, was my first job out of college, and was not what I was expecting to do. um, and frankly, in the very beginning was still unsure like what I wanted to do and what I was like really passionate about. And so if it wasn't for the people, there's a very good chance I probably would have jumped ship and gone somewhere else. And so I made there are friends that I've made that are still at the company. I mean, most of our leaders here have been here for a long time, 20 plus years in some situations. So we kind of make jokes around here that if you get past like the 5 year mark, there's a good chance you're going to be here a while, because we tend to keep people, which is great.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Does it make things, how do I phrase this? Does it make things tough for new hires to come in when people have been there 5, 10, 20 years?
I think so. I mean, I've probably actually more recently noticed this where, there's kind of these pockets of, I would say, especially on the leadership side, you'll have people that are like 15, 20, 25 years, then kind of like the middle tier, which I would kind of place myself in, which is like 12 to 13 years. And then a lot of the younger folks, I think it can be intimidating sometimes. I don't recall if I was intimidated when I started, but I feel like I'm in situations now where there's a lot of people that are just newer to the team, especially like even less than 2 years, because we've grown so much, partially because of the pandemic and for other reasons. And so just trying to like make them feel like they're welcome and a part of that, I think is what we're still trying to focus on. And we were at home for 3 years. We were in no rush to come back to the office. And so people were hired during that time that did not experience the culture before that. So some of it's kind of like just trying to like reinvigorate like, all the things that we were doing then to make sure we're keeping up to speed with that.
I can imagine, maybe this isn't true for you, but I can imagine it would be easy to say, hey, I personally, or pick any employee there who's been there a while, to say, I know how to do this. I've been doing it for a decade. Rather than teaching you how to do it, I'm just going to handle it real quick because that would be faster. Is that a challenge that comes up? And if so, how do you kind of handle the ongoing intentional coaching with employees?
Yeah, good question. So personally for myself, yes, that is like an area that I've been striving to grow in. I'm the kind of personality that I work quickly, and to your point, like sometimes it feels like, okay, I can answer this question, let's just get it taken care of, or I can do this report, or whatever the ask is. And in the beginning, when it was just myself, like I didn't really have that option, or when I wasn't in a leadership role, right? But over the years, as I've been kind of an elevated and now have a team under me, that's something that I'm constantly trying to evaluate, and also just like sort of redefine what my role is. And so for years, it was more of the day-to-day kind of operational tasks. And now it's kind of taking a step back, a little higher level kind of vision casting. I would say I've definitely grown, especially I'd say in the last few years, but there's always more room for growth. And I still find myself like jumping in when it's like, did I need to?
Yeah, all of that makes sense. Is has the learning and evolution here that you've taken, has it been all forced from through work specifically, or where do you go to learn? Are you someone who reads a lot, or who just asks questions to people, or goes to conferences, or does none of that and the job just takes care of it for you? Just tell me about that.
Yeah, so my background, so my role now is primarily overseeing like the technology pipeline that we're creating, and I have an art degree, so very different. And so there was a little bit of a kind of, I don't know if you're familiar with the term, but like an imposter syndrome when I started years ago of just feeling like I don't really know what I'm doing, but I'm supposed to be doing all these things. And so over time that has definitely matured, and I'm much more comfortable and like confident in my role, and like I've found like a lot of passion and love for what I'm doing, and so that has helped. But I'm constantly I still at times feel like I'm uneducated in certain areas, and so conferences, yes, I will check out several kind of more just like industry or topical conferences surrounding technology development, or potentially even like in the healthcare space specifically, if those things are available. But I also subscribe to probably too many things. um, whether it's newsletters or some sort of, there are different sort of collections of professionals kind of, they're not as formalized as like an association, but it's kind of like a group of people in similar roles that either share ideas or best practices. There's also, I haven't done this yet, but I'm kind of looking into it. There are some companies that kind of have spun up and created their own like paid for like educational kind of courses, that are more than just like, a half day seminar or whatever kind of the older traditional model is. And so I'm looking into things like that. But yeah, I read a lot. I listen to a lot of, podcasts and things like that. So I kind of absorb as much as I can. And then the challenge is taking that information and actually like applying it or like doing something with it is kind of where I'm at now. Is I have so much information, and what am I, how am I going to help my team like act on that? So
Yeah, well, excuse me, following up on that, how do you determine whether something you learn or hear from somebody else is worth following up on, or it's just something that's maybe it's a good idea for somebody, but it's not a right fit for you?
I think I've kind of matured over the years where I feel like all ideas are worth something to at least explore, and that exploration can be in different varying levels of depth, right? Like sometimes it can just be a quick conversation with someone, or sometimes it's let's sit down and whiteboard, what this could or would look like. But I think one thing is a repetition. And so if I hear multiple people saying something similar, it kind of, piques my interest a little bit more. Or if it's coming from sources that I respect or really admire in what they're doing, I think that can be helpful too. But I'm a big proponent of just collaboration. And so if I have some like a new framework or some new idea to how we're going to organize or structure something, I definitely want to pitch it to like the team, and like not pitch it to like sell it, but just say, hey, like, what do you guys think about this? Like, do you think this would work, like short term, long term? Like, yes, is it going to help us now? Is it going to cause more problems like 5 years from now, where we're, rethinking this? And so a lot of it just comes down to just that collaborative aspect of, if the team's on board and I feel good about it, then yeah, let's give it a shot and, see how it goes.
Justin, this has been a great conversation so far. I want to keep it going all afternoon, to be honest, but I'm going to see if we can end with this one question.
Yeah.
And maybe this is too big, but is there anything that you have learned or that you have changed in the last year or so that has had an outsized impact?
Um, let's see. I mean, I guess I would kind of, this is dovetails a little bit off what we were just talking about, but I think more within the last 12 to 18 months, there's been a lot more of the implementation of new ideas, that we kind of discussed. And so some of that is um, how we're structuring our delivery of our pipeline items. Some of that is how we're prioritizing those items, where I kind of alluded to it earlier, but in the past it was kind of like a, hey, this feels right. I feel like this would be a great feature for our product. But now there's much more of a like an impact scoring kind of mechanism behind that. And so a lot of those things are really starting to take off, and is helping us. be a lot more data driven type of solution, which I'm a huge advocate of. I don't want to, while our opinions are great and sometimes can be spot on, like other times the data tells us the exact opposite. And so I want to make sure that we're, constantly referring back to that. So that's been a huge push for us, is just, okay, here's the problem. What does the data say? And then that kind of directs where our solutions go instead of the other way around.
I love it. All right, Justin, thank you so much for your time
Yeah,
today.
absolutely. Thanks, Kenneth.